My parents let my brother steal my work and destroy my scholarship interview, so I let karma ruin him in front of everyone. I didn't ruin my brother's life. I didn't even touch him. I didn't have to. Because the day my parents sat in a packed university auditorium and watched my brother get exposed in front of professors, donors, and the very people who could have handed him his future. I watched my mom's face turn pale. I watched my dad's jaw tighten like he was chewing on glass. And I watched my golden child brother, Mason, stare at the projector screen like it was a death sentence. Because on that screen was the proof. My name. My timestamps, my drafts, my work. The same work Mason had stolen from me, claimed as his own, and used to destroy my scholarship interview. The same work my parents told me to just let go because family comes first. And the best part, I didn't even have to say a word. The room did it for me. The silence did it for me. The humiliation did it for me. And Mason did it for himself. That was the day my parents realized they had spent their entire lives protecting the wrong son. But by then, it was too late, because my future was already built without them. And Mason's was collapsing in real time. I'm Liam, 22 years old. I grew up in a small town outside Columbus, Ohio. One of those places where everyone knows your business, your parents' business, and what you ate for dinner last night. My family looked normal from the outside. A 2-story house with a neat lawn, a dad who worked in logistics, a mom who worked part-time at a local insurance office, and 2 sons, me, the quiet one, and my older brother Mason, the star. At least that's what everyone called him, because Mason was the kid who got trophies for breathing. He was tall, confident, loud. He could walk into a room and people would immediately turn toward him like he was a magnet. Meanwhile, I was the kid who stayed in the corner, reading, listening, thinking. And in my family, that meant one thing: Mason was the sun. And I was just the shadow. In our house, Mason lived by a different set of rules. If Mason got a B, my parents said, "Good job, honey." If I got a B, my dad would say, "What happened? You're smarter than this." If Mason forgot to do chores, my mom would laugh and say, "He's busy." If I forgot, she'd look at me like I'd personally betrayed her. When Mason was in high school, he played football for 1 season. 1 season. He sat on the bench half the time. But my parents still framed his jersey and hung it in the hallway like he was some kind of NFL legend. Meanwhile, I was doing academic competitions, coding projects, and science fairs. I once placed second in a statewide engineering contest. Second in the whole state. I came home holding the certificate like it was made of gold, and my mom barely looked up from the kitchen counter. She just said, "That's nice, Liam. Put it somewhere safe." Then she turned around and yelled, "Mason, dinner's ready." That was my childhood. That was my reality. And the worst part, I learned early not to complain. Because if I complained, my parents would act like I was being dramatic. They'd say things like, "Stop making everything a competition. You know Mason needs more support. You're independent, Liam. You don't need us as much." It was their favorite line. I didn't need them as much, so they gave me less. And Mason got everything. When I was 18, I got accepted into Ohio State University. Not because my parents pushed me. Not because they helped me, because I worked for it. I applied to scholarships, wrote essays, stayed up late doing applications while Mason was out partying. I got a partial scholarship, enough to reduce my tuition, but not enough to cover everything. So I worked. I worked in the library. I worked in the campus IT department. I took night shifts at a grocery store off campus. My life was basically coffee, textbooks, and exhaustion. But I had a plan. A big plan. Because my major was computer science with a focus on AI systems. And I had this dream: I wanted to build something meaningful. Not just some app, not some startup nonsense, something that mattered. During my sophomore year, I joined a research group on campus. It was small, mostly grad students. They were working on predictive models for supply chain efficiency. Basically, using machine learning to reduce waste and optimize transportation. And something clicked inside me, because my dad worked in logistics. I'd grown up hearing him complain about delays, wasted inventory, shipping errors. I realized I could build a system that solved real problems, so I started working on my own project. It was a predictive logistics optimization tool, a model that analyzed patterns, weather, traffic, shipment history, and predicted delays before they happened. It could help companies reroute shipments in advance, save money, reduce waste. It was my baby. I worked on it for almost a year. Every line of code, every draft, every model adjustment was mine. And I wasn't just doing it for fun. Because OSU had this massive scholarship program called the Hawthorne Innovation Scholarship. It was funded by donors, big donors, and it covered full tuition, housing, and a stipend. It was basically a golden ticket, but it wasn't easy. Only 5 students got it each year. And to get it, you needed an original project and a killer interview. I knew this scholarship could change my life. So I poured everything into it. And when I finally got the email that I was selected for the final interview, I cried. Not like a dramatic sobbing mess, but tears just rolled down my face quietly. Because for once, something in my life felt like it was mine, something I earned, something no one could take from me. I was wrong. Mason didn't go to OSU. He went to a smaller local college about 40 minutes away. And the truth, he didn't do great. He barely passed his classes. He changed majors twice. He partied a lot. But my parents never talked about that. They always talked about him like he was finding himself. Meanwhile, I was working myself to the bone. During my junior year, Mason suddenly started visiting home more often. And since I lived in an apartment near campus, I'd sometimes come home on weekends to see my parents. Not because I loved being there, but because a part of me still wanted to believe my parents cared. One weekend, I walked into the kitchen and Mason was sitting at the table with his laptop open. My mom was hovering over him like he was doing brain surgery. She smiled when she saw me. "Oh, Liam, you're home. Mason's been working on something important." Mason smirked. He said, "Yeah, something big, you probably wouldn't get it." I laughed awkwardly. "Okay." Then my dad walked in and slapped Mason on the back. "That's my boy. Finally doing something with his head." I remember freezing, because he said it like Mason had just invented electricity. Then my dad turned to me. "Oh, Liam, how's school?" Just like that. Like my entire existence was a background detail. I swallowed my frustration and said, "Good, I actually got selected for the Hawthorne Scholarship interview." My mom blinked. "The what scholarship?" I stared at her. "The Hawthorne Innovation Scholarship. It's huge. It covers everything." She nodded slowly like she didn't understand. "Oh, well, that's nice." My dad shrugged. "That's good, but scholarships are competitive. Don't get your hopes up." Then he turned back to Mason. "So what's this project you're working on?" Mason leaned back in his chair and smiled like a king, and in that moment something in me snapped. Because I realized, no matter what I did, Mason would always be their favorite. But I still didn't know what was coming. A few weeks later, I got a call from my mom. She sounded unusually cheerful. "Liam, we're having dinner this Sunday. Mason's coming. You should come too." I hesitated. "Why, what's the occasion?" She giggled. "Oh, nothing, just family time." Family time, that phrase always made me nervous, but I went. When I arrived, Mason was already there. He was wearing a button-up shirt like he was trying to look professional. He even had a folder on the table. I sat down slowly. My dad said, "So, Liam, we heard you're doing some kind of computer thing." I frowned. "Yeah, my project for the scholarship interview." Mason leaned forward. "What exactly is it again?" I stared at him. "You know. The logistics optimization model I've been building." He nodded slowly. "Oh, right, the thing with predicting shipments." I felt weird, because Mason had never asked me about my work before, not once. My mom smiled. "Mason is thinking of applying for some internship. He wanted to know what you're working on." I swallowed. Then my dad said, "Why don't you show him? You always act like you're too good to share things with your own brother." That hit me like a slap. Because I didn't act like I was too good, I just didn't trust Mason. But I didn't want to start a fight, so I pulled out my laptop, and I showed him. I showed him my code structure. I showed him the interface mock-up. I showed him my presentation slides. And Mason's his eyes lit up like he'd found buried treasure. He kept saying things like, "Wow, that's actually impressive." Or, "Wait, you built this yourself." My mom kept smiling proudly like Mason was the one doing it. And my dad nodded like he was evaluating my worth. At the end of the night, Mason clapped me on the shoulder. "Good stuff, little bro." Little bro, like he was proud, but his smile felt wrong. It wasn't admiration, it was hunger. The Hawthorne Scholarship interview was scheduled for a Friday morning. I spent the entire week preparing. I practiced my speech. I memorized my slides. I rehearsed answers to possible questions. I even recorded myself speaking and watched it back. By Thursday night, I was ready. I felt nervous but confident. I remember standing in front of my mirror, tying my tie, thinking, this is it. This is the moment my life changes. Friday morning, I arrived at the interview building early. It was a huge hall with glass walls and polished floors. I could see other candidates sitting around, flipping through notes. I sat down and took a deep breath. Then a woman with a clipboard walked up to me. "Liam Carter?" "Yes," she smiled politely. "Can you come with me for a moment?" I stood up. My heart started pounding. She led me into a side room. Inside was a panel of 3 people. One of them was a professor I recognized, Dr. Wallace. He was known for being brutally honest. He looked at me with a strange expression, not angry, not friendly, just confused. He said, "Liam, before we begin, I need to ask you something." My throat went dry. "Yes." He slid a folder across the table. Inside were printed screenshots, my code, my slides, my project description. But on top was another name, Mason Carter, my brother's name. I felt my stomach drop. Dr. Wallace leaned forward. "We received a project submission identical to yours under the name Mason Carter. He is also scheduled to interview next week." I couldn't breathe. My hands started shaking. I whispered, "That's impossible." Dr. Wallace's eyes narrowed. "Is it?" I swallowed hard. "That project is mine. I built it. I have the drafts. The timestamps, everything." The woman beside him said, "Liam, plagiarism is a serious issue. We need to know if this is a collaboration or if there's been a violation." My head spun. I said, "It's not a collaboration. He stole it." Silence. Dr. Wallace leaned back. "If that is true, then why did he have access?" And that question made me feel stupid. Because I had shown him, I had trusted him. I had let my family guilt me into sharing. My voice cracked. "I didn't think he'd do this. He's my brother." Dr. Wallace sighed. "We are pausing your interview until we investigate. You may leave." Just like that. The moment I'd spent a year building was ripped away in 5 minutes. I walked out of the building like a ghost. I didn't even remember getting to my car. I just sat there staring at the steering wheel. And then I started laughing. Not because it was funny. Because it was so cruel that my brain didn't know what else to do. Then I cried. I cried so hard my chest hurt, because it wasn't just my brother. It was my parents, too. They had to know. They had to. There was no way Mason did this without their support. And the worst part, I could already hear my mom's voice in my head. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. And my dad's, "Don't accuse your brother. You're being dramatic." But I wasn't going to let them gaslight me this time, so I drove straight home. When I walked into the house, my mom was in the living room folding laundry. She looked up and smiled. "Oh, you're home early. How did it go?" I didn't even take my shoes off. I said, "Where's Mason?" Her smile faltered. "He's out." "Why?" My voice was shaking. "Did you know Mason submitted my project under his name?" My mom blinked. "What are you talking about?" I stepped closer. "Don't play dumb. The scholarship committee received an identical submission with Mason's name on it. My interview was canceled." My mom's mouth opened slightly. Then she laughed nervously. "Oh, Liam, that can't be right." I stared at her. Then my dad walked in from the kitchen. "What's going on?" I turned to him. "Mason stole my project, submitted it as his own. My scholarship interview was canceled." My dad's face tightened. He didn't look shocked. He didn't look confused. He looked annoyed, like I was causing trouble. He said, "Lower your voice." I felt rage rising. "Lower my voice." "Dad, he stole a year of my work." My dad crossed his arms. "Maybe you should have kept your work private." I froze. I whispered, "You told me to show him." My dad shrugged. "That doesn't mean he stole it." My mom stood up quickly. "Liam, maybe Mason just got inspired. Maybe he made his own version." I snapped. "No, it's identical, even my formatting." My mom's eyes got watery. "Why are you always so harsh on your brother?" That sentence felt like a knife. Because in that moment I realized something. They weren't angry at Mason. They were angry at me for calling him out. My dad sighed. "You know Mason's been struggling. He needs something to get ahead." I stared at him like he'd lost his mind. "So you let him steal from me?" My dad said coldly. "It's not stealing if it's family, your brothers. You share." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My mom stepped closer. "Sweetheart, you're smart. You'll be fine. Mason needs this more." I felt like the floor disappeared under me, because they weren't even denying it. They were justifying it. I whispered, "So you knew." My mom didn't answer. My dad said, "Don't make this into a big deal." I started shaking. "A big deal? This scholarship could have paid my entire tuition." My dad's voice rose. "And you still have other opportunities. Mason doesn't." I stared at them both. Then I said the words that changed everything. "Fine, if Mason wants my future, he can have it, but I'm done being your backup son." Then I walked out. And I didn't come back. The next month was the worst month of my life. My scholarship interview was postponed. But I knew what that meant. It meant my name was now connected to plagiarism. Even if they believed me, the damage was done. I stopped sleeping. I stopped eating properly. I started skipping classes because my brain felt like it was drowning. Every time I opened my laptop, I saw Mason's name stamped over my work. And the betrayal wasn't just Mason. It was my parents, too, because if my parents had apologized, if they had said, "We're sorry, Liam, this was wrong," maybe I could have forgiven them, but they didn't. Instead, my mom called me 1 week later, crying. Liam, Mason is stressed. He feels attacked. You need to stop making him feel guilty. I almost laughed. She wasn't calling to check on me. She was calling to protect him. She said, your dad thinks you're being selfish. Selfish, because I didn't want my life stolen. I hung up without saying goodbye, and after that they stopped calling, because in their minds I was the problem, not Mason. One night around 2 a.m. I was sitting in my apartment staring at my laptop. My project files were open. My drafts were there. The creation timestamps, the GitHub commit history, the emails I'd sent to my research group. Everything, and suddenly I realized something. Mason didn't just steal my project. He didn't understand it, because Mason could barely pass his basic programming class. There was no way he could defend it in an interview, which meant he was going to embarrass himself, but my parents would still protect him. They would still blame me. Unless I made sure the truth was undeniable, not in a family argument, not in private, but in public. Where they couldn't twist it, where they couldn't cry and manipulate, where they couldn't rewrite history. I didn't want revenge at first. I wanted justice. But after what they did, I wanted both, so I made a plan, and I made it quietly. The scholarship committee told me the investigation would take time, but I had a professor ally, Dr. Patel, my advisor. When I told him what happened, his face turned dark. He said, Liam, if you have proof, we can fight this. I showed him everything. The GitHub repository, the file history, the drafts, the early prototypes, the emails with timestamps. Dr. Patel nodded slowly. Then he said, you didn't just build a project, you built a case. That's when he told me something that changed everything. He said, the Hawthorne donors attend a public presentation event every year. Finalists present their projects. It's not just an interview, it's a showcase. My heart skipped. I said, Mason will be there. Dr. Patel nodded. And if he presents stolen work in front of professors who know what to look for, he will be exposed. I felt my hands tighten. I said, can I present too? Dr. Patel smiled. If we clear your name by then, yes. So we fought. Dr. Patel helped me contact the committee. I submitted all my proof, and for weeks I waited. Then 2 weeks before the showcase, I got an email. Liam Carter cleared of misconduct. I stared at the screen like it was unreal. They believed me. And not only that, they invited me to present at the showcase. And Mason. Mason was still scheduled, too, because the committee hadn't told him he was under suspicion. They wanted to see what he'd do. They wanted to see if he'd dig his own grave, and I was about to hand him the shovel. The day of the Hawthorne showcase, I wore my best suit. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from anticipation. The auditorium was huge, hundreds of people, students, faculty, donors. And there in the front row, I saw them. My mom, my dad, and Mason. Mason looked confident. He was wearing a suit, too. He was laughing with my parents like nothing had happened, like he hadn't stolen a year of my life. My mom saw me and her smile dropped. She leaned toward my dad and whispered something. My dad's eyes locked onto me, cold, angry, like I was the one who betrayed them. Mason looked at me and smirked. He mouthed, good luck. I almost smiled because he had no idea. I was scheduled before Mason, which was perfect. When my name was called, I stepped onto the stage. The lights were bright. The microphone felt heavy, but the moment I started speaking, something inside me calmed down. Because this was my work. This was my voice. I explained the model, the purpose, the architecture, the testing results, the data sets. I answered questions confidently. The panel nodded. The audience clapped. And when I finished, I glanced toward my family. My mom looked stunned. My dad looked tense. Mason looked nervous because he knew he couldn't match that, and then Mason's name was called. Mason walked on stage with confidence that didn't belong to him. He smiled at the audience. He introduced himself. And then he started speaking. At first, he sounded okay, because he was reading my slides, my words. But then the questions started. A professor asked, can you explain why you chose that specific neural network architecture? Mason blinked. He stammered. Well, it's the best one. The professor frowned. Another asked, how did you clean your data set? Mason froze. He looked down at his notes like he expected the answer to appear. He said, I used standard methods. The audience started murmuring. Then Dr. Wallace leaned forward and asked the question that ended Mason. He said, Mason, could you pull up your Git commit history and show us your development timeline? Mason's face went pale. Because he didn't even know what Git commits were, he swallowed. I don't have it with me. Dr. Wallace nodded slowly. Interesting, Liam Carter showed his commit history. His repository dates back 11 months. The room got quiet. Mason's eyes darted. Then Dr. Wallace said calmly, would you like us to show yours? Mason's lips parted. He whispered, what? Dr. Wallace signaled to someone. And suddenly the projector changed. A screen appeared showing two repositories side by side. One labeled Liam Carter, one labeled Mason Carter. The audience leaned forward. Then the timestamps appeared. Liam's commit started 11 months ago. Mason's commit started 2 weeks ago. And every file Mason had was copied. Identical, even the comments, even the formatting, even the tiny mistakes I'd made early on. The room erupted in whispers. Mason stood frozen. Then Dr. Wallace said loudly, "Would you like to explain why your repository is a direct clone of Liam Carter's?" Mason's mouth opened. No words came out. And then I heard my mom gasp. It was loud. It was desperate. She whispered, "Oh my God!" My dad stood up halfway like he wanted to stop it. But he couldn't, because it was too late. The truth was on the screen, in front of everyone. Mason tried to laugh. He said, This is a misunderstanding." Dr. Wallace's voice was ice. "A misunderstanding is when you accidentally cite the wrong paper." He pointed at the screen. "This is theft." The room went dead silent. Then Mason turned and looked directly at me. And in his eyes I saw fear, not guilt, not regret. Fear, because for the first time in his life he wasn't protected. He wasn't the golden child. He was just exposed. My mom stood up. Her voice shook. "Wait, this can't be right." People turned to look at her. She realized she was drawing attention. She sat down quickly. My dad looked like he was about to explode. His face was red. His jaw was clenched. And Mason started sweating. He tried to speak again. He said, "Liam probably copied me. He's always been jealous." The room actually reacted. A few people laughed, not because it was funny, because it was pathetic. Dr. Wallace didn't even look at me. He looked at Mason and said, "Your statement is unsupported and frankly insulting." Then he turned to the audience. "We will be removing Mason Carter from the scholarship process immediately." Mason's knees almost buckled. He whispered, No, you can't." Dr. Wallace said, "We just did." Then he added, "And this will be reported to your institution." That was it. That was Mason's death sentence. Because academic dishonesty isn't just embarrassment. It's career poison. Mason walked off the stage like a man being escorted to prison. The audience didn't clap. No one clapped. It was silent. And I sat there feeling something I never expected. Not joy, not satisfaction, but peace. Because the truth finally won. After the event, people approached me, professors, students, donors. They shook my hand. They told me they were impressed. They told me they were sorry for what happened. I smiled politely. But my eyes kept drifting toward my family. My mom was crying. My dad was pacing like a trapped animal. Mason was nowhere. Then my dad stormed toward me. He grabbed my arm hard. "Outside, now." I didn't resist. I walked outside with him. My mom followed, sobbing. And then Mason appeared too, looking furious. The moment we were away from the crowd, my dad exploded. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I blinked. "What's wrong with me?" he shouted. "You humiliated your brother." I stared at him. "Number Mason humiliated himself when he stole my work." My mom cried, "Liam, please, why couldn't you just let him have this?" That sentence almost made me laugh. I said slowly, "Let him have this. Mom, this scholarship was my future." Mason snapped, "You always have to be the victim, don't you?" I turned to him. My voice was calm. "Say it again. Tell me you didn't steal it." Mason's eyes flashed. He looked away. My dad shouted, "He needed it." I stepped back. "So did I," my mom sobbed, "but Mason's been struggling." I cut her off. "And I haven't. I've been working 2 jobs, barely sleeping, trying to keep my grades up while you two treat me like a spare part." My dad pointed at me. "You're ungrateful." I stared at him. Then I said something that made all 3 of them freeze. "I hope it was worth it, because from today you don't have 2 sons, you have one, the one you chose." My mom gasped. "Liam, don't say that." I nodded. "I just did." Then I looked at Mason. "You wanted my life, take it, but you'll never take my peace again." Then I walked away, and this time no one stopped me. A week later, I got the email. "Congratulations, you have been awarded the Hawthorne Innovation Scholarship. Full tuition, full housing, stipend, everything." I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I leaned back in my chair and exhaled. It felt unreal. It felt like the universe had finally decided to be fair. And Mason's college opened an investigation. He was suspended, then expelled. My parents tried to call me. I ignored them. They texted me. I didn't reply. Because what could they say? "Sorry we destroyed your future, but it didn't work." That's not an apology. That's regret. And regret isn't love. 2 months later, I got a knock on my apartment door. When I opened it, my mom was standing there. She looked older, tired, like life had finally hit her. My dad stood behind her, arms crossed, face hard. Mason wasn't with them. My mom whispered, "Can we come in?" I hesitated, then stepped aside. They sat on my couch like strangers. My mom's hands were shaking. She said, "Liam, we didn't know it would go that far." I stared at her. You didn't know stealing my work would go far, my dad snapped. Don't be sarcastic. I looked at him. You're still angry at me. He clenched his jaw. My mom started crying again. Mason is depressed. He's not eating. He's talking about how his life is over. I stayed silent. Then she said softly, we need you to forgive him. That's when I realized they weren't here to apologize. They were here to fix Mason, to use me again. I said quietly, where's Mason? My dad said, he didn't want to come. He's ashamed. I nodded, then I asked, did he ever say sorry? My mom hesitated, then whispered, he said he didn't mean to hurt you. I laughed, just a small, bitter laugh. He didn't mean to hurt me. Mom, he literally tried to steal my future. My dad slammed his hand on his knee. Enough, you got your scholarship, you won, stop punishing him. I stared at him, then I stood up. And I said the calmest, most brutal truth of my life. I didn't win, I survived. They both looked at me, I continued. Mason didn't lose because of me. Mason lost because he finally faced consequences. And you're not sorry he did it, you're sorry he got caught. My mom sobbed harder. My dad's eyes narrowed. Then I said, you want forgiveness? Fine, here it is. They leaned forward like they couldn't breathe. I said, I forgive you for being the parents you were capable of being. My mom blinked. My dad looked confused. I finished. But I will never trust you again, and you will never be part of my life the way you used to be. My mom whispered, Liam. I opened the door. I'm not your backup son anymore. Goodbye. And they left. A year later, my life looked completely different. I had internships lined up. My scholarship was secure. My project was being expanded by a research team. And I had something I never had before, freedom. My parents still tried to reach out sometimes. My mom sent birthday texts. My dad sent short messages like, hope you're doing okay? But I didn't respond. Not because I hated them. Because I finally understood something. Sometimes the people who raise you don't deserve access to the person you become. Mason eventually got a job at a car dealership. My mom told a relative that he was starting fresh. Starting fresh. That was their favorite phrase, but I knew the truth. Mason didn't start fresh. He started smaller, because his whole life was built on shortcuts. And shortcuts collapse. Eventually. As for me, I stopped needing their approval. And that was the real revenge, not the scholarship, not the exposure, not the humiliation, but the fact that I finally became someone they couldn't control. Someone they couldn't take from. Someone they couldn't rewrite. And if there's one thing I learned from all of it, it's this. The golden child isn't always golden. Sometimes they're just the one who never had to earn anything. And when real life finally demands proof, they crumble. Because the truth is, Mason didn't just steal my project. He stole my family's last chance to ever be proud of the right son. And when karma finally hit him, it didn't just destroy his future. It exposed the ugly truth my parents spent years trying to hide. They didn't raise a winner. They raised a thief. And they raised him to believe he deserved everything, even what wasn't his. But the world doesn't care who your mom loves most. The world only cares who actually did the work. And this time, it wasn't Mason. It was me. It was always me.